Imagine this reality. You're a Prime-Time Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. You experience tragic losses of your spouse and your job. Then you find new purpose as an Alaskan Media Park Ranger, walking to work with 1,000-pound brown bears. How do you overcome those life losses to find new peace and purpose? Learn firsthand from the woman who walked in those shoes. On this episode of Pause for Purpose, meet Naomi Boak and her inspiring story from limelight to the Alaskan wilderness.
On this inaugural day, we've been honoring and celebrating many values and talents that we all hold dear. And it just seems only fitting that the other end of this day that we showcase another realm of talent belonging to none other than Naomi Boak. Her story touches on so many multiple challenges that a lot of us will recognize. Things like reaching the heights of a very successful career, to rejection, to dealing with ageism, death of a spouse, grief, floundering, depression, new beginnings, finding new purpose. And put that all together, we could spend an hour on discussing credits of Naomi, but rather than that, suffice it to say, they span both breadth and depth of multiple talents. From her anthropology major at Stanford University years ago, then graduate work at UCLA School of Theater and Film and TV, Naomi worked first with Labrador Retrievers as therapy dog team at places like Ground Zero back on 9/11, and also helped children with cerebral palsy as they worked toward therapeutic goals. From there, she produced, wrote, appeared on Explorer's live broadcast to 10 million viewers. She was a senior producer and writer of an Emmy award-winning primetime children's TV specials, consultant to theater and documentary films, actor, talent director, producer, brand consultant, mentor, website designer, integral member of national production teams, and she developed primetime PBS specials, which from all of that struck out on her own. And in all these endeavors, she's been an accomplished television executive producer, director, but in 2019, her passions headed to the Northeast. And to delve deeper into that whole realm of her art and expression, we now are going to turn it over to Vicki Thomas, who is co-founder of My Future Purpose. And Naomi, from all of us, we just want to say welcome. And I'm going to continue to let people in as they arrive, and we'll go from here. And Vicki will serve interview style. And so we'll put the showcase on Naomi from here on.
Perfect. Okay. I promise not to stick my finger up my nose.
Welcome everyone. We are thrilled you all chose to. Can we have people mute?
Everybody, put yourself on mute, please.
Yes. Okay, you didn't put me on mute, did you, Joyce?
Not you. I was
okay.
Perfectly. Yep, you're fine,
Okay.
And Naomi's fine.
Great. So as we were saying, we're delighted to see so many faces join us for this very interesting presentation, and we are very honored to be featuring Naomi Boak. And so we're going to do the way we usually do, kind of a Barbara Walters, Oprah Winfrey interview. And the first question I have for Naomi is, where'd you get your start in life? How did this all begin?
My start in life. Oh my God. Well, I'm a born and bred New Yorker, and related to my current life as someone who works around bears. I've always been an animal lover. We've always, our family always had animals, and I grew up showing horses. I started riding when I was 2, believe it or not, in the city. And
I assume she means New York City, New York. Yeah.
Yes. And so, I just had this odd combination of interests, which my parents encouraged me to pursue. I started in acting school when I was 7, and was good at it, but and I stuck with it till I left high school. But and I studied professionally in New York, but I knew I wasn't going to be an ingenue, and so I moved more towards directing. And then went to college and thought I'd be a professor, and I went, not going to do that, and then veered into television. So
Where was your first job? Where did you land when you got into television?
my first job was for a very small production company in Princeton, New Jersey. It was the Dick Roberts Film Company, and there are a lot of us who got our start with him. And I had just I was still in California, and I was gonna head back east, and he hired me, worked for him for a couple of years, and then worked at CBS and all kinds of places. I've had a very eclectic career. When I worked at IBM, people at IBM usually would go there right after college and be there for the rest of their working lives. And so they'd ask me, and I was in my late 30s when I started at IBM, and they said, "So what company did you work for?" And I'd laugh and I'd say, "Well, I've had a television career. I've worked for a zillion companies."
Okay, so you produced this Emmy award-winning film called Forgetting, a portrait of Alzheimer's in 2004 that received quite a bit of national critical acclaim. Describe that experience and the role you played in it, and how it came together.
Well, I was the executive producer, and I was actually interviewing at Twin Cities Public Television with the head of the National Television Department, and we were talking about different things that we wanted to do, and the subject of Alzheimer's came up, and I said, "Oh, I'd really love to do a documentary about Alzheimer's disease. My dad had Alzheimer's disease," and Jerry, who was interviewing me, said, "Okay, let's do that." And so I went back to New York and worked on a freelance basis developing this film. And when I went home, I went, "Oh my God, how am I going to do this? I mean, how do you make a film about Alzheimer's that people are going to watch?" Excuse me. So it ended up that David Shank had written a book called The Forgetting, A Portrait of Alzheimer's. And I found his book about that time. And I called up David and I said, "Do you still have the broadcast rights?" So immediately got the broadcast rights, and we developed this documentary. And it was an intense experience because I didn't direct it. Betsy Arledge, who's an amazing director, directed it. And telling that story had quite an impact on a lot of people. And it was very exciting to win the Emmy and get that recognition. And it was the beginning of doing a number of stories about Alzheimer's disease.
Did you spend a lot of time in the aging beat? In other words, stories about older adults?
I did. I was at Twin Cities Public Television when Jim Palmiorini and Judy Diaz started Next Avenue. And so I had input there, strategic input there. And then I executive produced a series called Life Part 2, which was 2 seasons on PBS, and it was all about aging. And I said it was a series for boomers on how not to hate growing old.
That's great. So of all the credits that you've achieved in life, what's your favorite project and why?
My favorite project. That's a tough one. I mean, my favorite job is the one that I have right now, is being with the Bears at Katmai. It's a privilege and
Good answer.
and just a thrill every day. I mean, no matter what goes wrong in my life when I'm out there, I walk home 1.5 miles to my cabin and everything's fine, because I run into bears and I run into spruce grouse and, all kinds of, little voles, and just nature takes over and it heals you. So it really is the best. These are the best projects that I've worked on. But I do have a favorite little film, and that one is, it's called Let the Band Play On. And it's a 7-minute film about people with Alzheimer's who do ballroom dancing every 2 weeks. And it was difficult to make and to figure out how to do, but it's, as someone said, probably the only joyful film they've ever seen about Alzheimer's disease.
Describe your role as the executive producer at Court TV Snap Judgment. What is that?
Snap Judgment was a daily comedy show on Court TV. And we mostly covered small claims courts because it's all about, I've hated you for 25 years and I'm finally going to bring you to small claims court. Because, I tripped over the plant by your driveway. The best part of the job was the fact that every day it was my job to laugh. If I weren't laughing at what was produced, then something was wrong. So that was really great. The tough part of the job were two things. One was getting people to see it, because at that time, Court TV was really young, and most of the people who watched it were older women, and the show was really designed for young men. And Court TV had this much money for publicity. So we had to do a lot to get people to see it. The other challenge was working with a lot of comedians. That's a challenge.
Time marched on in your life, as it does for all of us, and you were in the Twin Cities, and you sadly lost your husband. It's kind of like life dumped on you all at the same time.
Yeah.
You lost your husband of 20 years, and then a job of 10 years, and you moved back to the city, to New York City. And during that, what was going on in your life at that time, from leaving the Twin Cities and moving back to New York City? How were you feeling? How were you adjusting and adapting to your losses?
Well, they were major losses. I mean, I essentially had lost everything that was important to me except for my dogs. The 10 years before, I called the decade of death, because I lost my mother, my father, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, 2 dogs and a cat. And then I lost my husband and my job. So grieving is complex. You don't know when it's going to hit you. You don't know how it's going to hit you. So there was a lot of up and down in dealing with that. But I was also pushing forward to do work. And when I went back to New York, I made some short films that I'm very proud of. And then I got really sick and couldn't do much of anything.
So describe that period of time. In other words, while you got sick, you became fascinated and hooked on explore.org.
Yeah.
Describe that and how that helped you at the time you were kind of healing and sick and a little bit depressed. Describe explore.org and how you found it.
Well, I was very sick for 2 years. I was nauseous for 2 years and couldn't get a diagnosis. I mean, finally got a diagnosis and healed up. And I also had severe arthritis in my hips. So I could barely walk. I mean, I had used a cane. I could, if I walking a half block was painful. And so in the projects that I was working on, it was just so difficult to do the work, to go and interview people and not want to throw up and be able to walk through the train station to get there. But some point in 2014, I don't know how it happened, when God's on your side, God's on your side. I found the bear cams on explore.org, and I got hooked. And it was this bear backpack, Bear 89, who would sit on his rock below the falls like a Buddha. And he hooked me and I couldn't stop watching. And there were all these interesting backstories to the bears. And so I watched every year religiously. And I watched the live chats that the Rangers did, and to learn more about the bears, and followed the soap operas, because it's about life and death and all these amazing things that happen with the bears. And nature is healing. Oliver Sacks has written a lot about that. So has E.O. Wilson. And although I could barely walk, and I, at that point, could never afford to get to Katmai, it's not cheap to get there. I just never imagined that I would get there. And so I loved it. I mean, I would go to places in New York, like I'd go out to a restaurant or a bar with someone during bear season, and I'd have my phone and I'd have the bears on my phone, and I'd interrupt my friends. It's like, oh my God, look, oh my God, 856 is pushing 747 out of the jacuzzi. And, so it was, and when you've had a martini or two, the bears get even more exciting. So, I really got hooked on them, and it was a lifeline. And the other thing about the bear cams that was truly wonderful is I'd never participated in a chat before. And I started looking at the chat, and I found these really interesting people who had this passion for nature and the bears, and who were also really empathetic people. And for the first time in my life, I participated in a chat, and I found this really wonderful community. And that's important too, when you're sitting in your apartment and not feeling well, and struggling, and was still getting over the loss of my husband, and so it was very important. And 4 years ago, I had both hips replaced, and the second note I received was from Jürgen from Stuttgart, from the bear cams. I think that says a lot about the bear cam people.
Okay, so you found you have this fascination, this passion. You've got a chat going with a community, and
Mhm.
then how in the world did you wind up landing a job that matched what was happening in your life and your passion? How did you become a media park ranger?
Well, I had just finished a consulting job in April. And in early May, I was on Facebook, and I would follow, where there were certain Facebook groups that bear cam lovers watch, and also the Katmai Conservancy group, which is Katmai Conservancy is the nonprofit that supports Katmai National Park and Preserve. And one day in early May, they put up a notice that the park needed 2 media rangers. And I thought, oh my God, this is perfect. I'm a television producer. I know the bears. I can do this. So I applied immediately. I got the job 10 days later, and 10 days after that, I was in Katmai. It was incredible.
And so when you got the job, did you describe how you got to Katmai? I mean, this is not like getting on American Airlines and going to Anchorage, and you take a little shuttle over to Brooks Park. How did you get there?
Well, first, before I got there, in the 10 days after I got hired, I had to give up my apartment, which I loved, because I couldn't sublet it. So, man, I had to pack up everything, get it in storage. I had to bring my dog 600 miles to Western Pennsylvania for her summer home. and come back. And then getting to Katmai, you fly 4,000 miles to Anchorage. And then from Anchorage, an hour plus to King Salmon. And then normally as rangers, we stay in King Salmon for a bit. Getting school this year, we stayed in King Salmon for quarantine for 2 weeks. But King Salmon, most people take float planes from King Salmon to Brooks Camp. And, but if you're a Park Service employee, most of the time you're on this little boat that goes across 30 miles across the glacial lake. So you got to bundle up, make sure you got warm gloves, a warm hat, and takes at that time of year, maybe up to 2 hours because the water level is pretty low. And you arrive in this really, really magical place. If you want, I have a little slideshow that can show you some of Brooks and where it is.
Why don't we go ahead and do that?
Okay. Let's see. I can.
You should be able to just.
Okay, you see that?
There you go.
So where that red arrow is where Brooks Camp is in Katmai National Park in Alaska, on the Alaska Peninsula. There are no roads to get there. You have to fly. It's off the road system. It's remote. And this is what most people go to Brooks Camp for. It's for all the bears at the falls. And there are probably, between around 12 bears at this point. But I've been there when there've been 23 or 24 bears at the falls. And then when you arrive,
my gosh,
this is what you see.
Now they
you can say,
we're kind of like,
you can say love at first sight.
Joyce, can you?
Well, I tried to mute everybody, but I think somebody keeps on muting themselves.
Okay.
So would everybody please mute yourself?
Okay, go ahead, Naomi.
Okay. So this is what you see when you arrive. This is Naknek Lake and the mountains behind, and in May, still some snow there. It is just stunning. And then probably just as you get off your plane, you'll see this. And you'll see a bear on the beach next to the planes. And these two gentlemen here are what we call bear techs. And Nick over here is a bear tech, and Carl is a volunteer bear tech. And their job is to manage the bears and manage the people. Now that may seem like oxymorons, but in Brooks Camp itself, we really don't want the bears to take over. Every place outside of Brooks Camp proper, they're in charge. They have right of way. They go where they want to go. But here, we don't want them to eat us out of house and home. We don't want people to get all tangled up with bears. So these people help make it possible, and they really know. They're up close and personal with bears all the time. And there's another common sight at Brooks Camp. This is bear 402 when she had 3 yearlings, and she's at the top of the falls. She's caught a salmon, and she's teaching her kids how to fish. And this one, the cheeky one, is trying to get the fish from her, and she's not going to do that right away. They've got to earn that. The bear you see behind me on the wall, this is what he looks like early in the season. That's his skinny picture. This is bear 747. And the job of the bears all season long is to get as fat as they can, because when they go into hibernate, that's what they live on. They don't lose muscle mass. They don't defecate. They don't urinate. They don't lose bone mass, and their fat stores get them through. So this is skinny 747. That's fat 747.
Oh my gosh.
Now, how do you know he's 747? Does he have a number somewhere?
Well, bears get numbers after they've been emancipated from their moms. They stay with their moms for usually 2 seasons. And then the beginning of the next season, mom says, I've had enough, you're out of here. And that's mainly because she's going to go into estrus again. So she kicks them out. She doesn't want them hanging around when big guys like that are hanging around her. And so then those bears are what we call subadults. They're the teenagers and the rascallions of the bear world. And when they're subadults, they get numbers after a bear monitor has seen them for 3 times, either in the spring or in the fall. They get a number. So this fellow got number 747 when he was a young subadult, and we had no idea that he was going to be as big as a jumbo jet. Because he is this big, and he's probably around 1,500 pounds, he won Fat Bear Week this year. He is the Earl of Avoirdupois. He is the 2020 Fat Bear Week champion. And Fat Bear Week is this, which is, it's like March Madness for bears. And my fellow media ranger, Brooklyn, and I, for the past 2 years, have made the brackets. Other rangers before us made brackets in previous years. We pit one bear against each other. We show their skinny pictures and their fat pictures. And then people all around the world vote every day for their favorite fattest bear until we get here for the final competition and then here for the championship. And this year, 650,000 people around the world voted for their favorite fattest bear. So it's quite a celebration of fatness and the success of these bears and the success of the ecosystem. I mean, it's quite amazing to be in a really successful ecosystem at a time when so many ecosystems are so immediately threatened. So that's a little bit about where I work.
And you get bear training? Bears are sometimes, I grew up on a farm and our bears attacked. They were not very nice bears.
Oh, well, you lived in the wrong farm.
I guess. I guess so.
Well, they're wild animals, and we need to treat them with the respect a wild animal is due. And we, as soon as you arrive at Brooks Camp, a ranger will give you bear school, bear orientation. And everyone has to do that every year, even rangers, as when we come back, we get bear orientation when we come back. And it tells us how to be around those bears and stay 50 yards away. And when we do come across a bear more closely, which will happen when you're around Brooks Falls, we tell people how to behave, which is be calm, be respectful, move out of the way, give the bear the right of way. And the bears at Brooks Falls, most of them are pretty used to human beings. One of the reasons they can get used to human beings is because they have to get used to each other in that environment. Bears are not used to being so close to other bears all the time, but along the Brooks River, if they want all that salmon, and Bristol Bay has the largest sockeye salmon run in the world, they have to learn how to live with each other. And because they learn how to live with each other, then they figure out how to live with us for the most part. But you don't want to get between a bear and its food or a sow and its cubs. And you want to pay attention to the signals that the bear is giving you. Now, bears in other places like Denali, where bears rarely come across other bears and they don't come across humans much, you have to stay 300 yards from that bear. So it's situational. But I don't think, in my mind, bears are wanting to attack humans. If they associate humans with food, which you can't eat outdoors except behind electric fences in Brooks Camp, and you can only carry water with you. If if you are not associated with food, or you don't become between a bear and its food, bear's not particularly interested in you.
You said that you escaped the trap of age and disability. What advice would you give to others that might be trapped because of age or maybe in their careers? How did you escape that, and how did that become your purpose?
Well, it's interesting. I've escaped it thus far. I've got a way to go, and I may not fully escape it. I think that I have always followed my muse in my career, in my life, probably to the detriment of my bank account. Well, I know to the detriment of my bank account. And I think an early lesson in getting something back from one's passion was when I worked as a therapy dog team with my Labradors. For a few years, I worked with the most severely disabled children in the New York City school system. It was volunteer work. I did it once a week, and we had therapeutic goals. And it changed the lives of many of those children, and changed my life. I think that we don't talk enough about what volunteer work does for us. We talk about, we'll help other people, and these kids got so much out of it. It changed my life to be working with those kids who couldn't walk, couldn't talk, but I could do something for them that was meaningful. And by sticking with my passion, the kind of advice I would have is, if you feel stuck, commit to your passion in some way. Find your passions and don't lose them, because there'll be times when you're going to be feeling pretty lousy, and those passions are going to pull you out of that. And those passions may turn into something else. It may turn into a job or a volunteer opportunity that gives you more joy from your passion. In my work in aging, I decided to create something I called a joy list. And what it is that I advise people to make a joy list for themselves. And that is a list of things that really bring them joy. Dogs, bears, flowers, bad B movies, whatever it is, dancing. And make sure your family members and your loved ones have that list, because there may come a time when you can't express to them what brings you joy. But it doesn't matter. Even when you can't express it, those things that have brought you joy throughout your life will bring you joy when you can't tell someone about it. So that to me is a real guiding post. And then not to be afraid to take big leaps. You heard about the big leap that I made from Harlem to Katmai in the space of 20 days. it can be a struggle, and we go in and out of struggles. We're struggling a lot now. Most of us are. And I just say that there's a lot to be had for finding your passions. And also right now, especially, nature is really healing. So if you're not in a place where you can enjoy nature, there are the explore.org cams, lots of good bird cams right now, and safari cam, and it's a wonderful place.
So what I'm going to do is ask you one more question, and that is, are you going to be going back to Katmai this summer? And what's your process to do that?
I hope I'm going back. Being a federal job, it's a bit of a convoluted process. I heard from Katmai this week, and they asked if I wanted to come back. That's not a job offer, that's a initial inquiry. And they're not going to be able to make decisions for a few weeks because there are a lot of moving pieces to this. The pandemic has changed in Alaska. There's a new administration, so that means that the superintendent, what he will and park management will be able to do potentially will be different. Last year we had half the number of park rangers that we usually do because we had to have individual housing for people. Normally we share cabins, and most of us didn't this year, especially someone like me who's over 65 and therefore high risk. And so they couldn't have as many people out there. The volunteers couldn't come because they live in a bunkhouse, and it was just very difficult. So there are a lot of complex decisions that park management has to make. But I sure hope that I'm going back. I miss being there.
So what I want to do now is we've got it covered many interesting topics through Naomi's life and experience. And I want to turn it over to questions. So anybody who has a question that they want to ask Naomi, now is your opportunity to do that. And I can't.
I'll start it off. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have two questions. You mentioned early on about a challenge working with comedians, and the hunch would be the opposite, that they would be easy to work with. And I'm just curious if you would talk on that. And then secondly, you mentioned that working with the cerebral palsy children changed your life. And I just wondered, would you speak a little more to that issue? So the comedians and what was life changing about doing the dog therapy teamwork?
Sure. Well, the young comedians view themselves more that comedy is a science. And I wasn't a comedian, I was an executive producer. So they were not the easiest people to give notes to. And it's just, it's a lot of work, and they were a little rambunctious. And it wasn't like working in a corporation. And I pride myself in creating a good creative environment for my staff. And so I didn't want to, suppress that. I wanted them to be that way. We've got a different screen on.
Yeah, did you put it on?
No. Not mine.
Oh dear.
Someone else isn't able to share screens. So anyway. So it was interesting. It was interesting to work with comedians. Some were great and some were just a real challenge. The cerebral palsy kids, there were two things in working with my therapy dog that really changed my life. One was working with the cerebral palsy kids, and the other thing was working at Ground Zero immediately after 9/11. With the kids, they, most of them could not walk, could not talk. So my dog would lie down on the floor with them, and so they could pet her. And some of it was like they were very stiff, and they would have a session with my dog George before their physical therapy session. So they loosened up by the dog. Another boy who could sometimes get really riled up and nervous. All he had to hear was that George was coming, and he'd calm down. There was one boy who learned how to talk because of George. He was about 5 years old. He had lived his entire life in the Foundling Hospital, and he'd never spoken a word. But Kathy Sanders, who was the special ed teacher I worked with, knew that he was musical and that he would enjoy watching George, but maybe not touching her. So we helped him throw a ball to her, and we would sing to him, "Where is George? Where is?" And we'd leave off the last word. And after maybe 6 weeks or so, he filled in the blank and said George. And it was the first word he had ever said. And it wasn't arbitrary, because if he saw a dog in a book, he would point to it and say George. And he was later adopted. And I don't have children, and I had wanted children, but I don't have them. And one thinks about one's legacy as your children. Those kids are my legacy. And I stopped worrying about my legacy when I was working with them. It's like, that's it. That's my legacy.
That's great. Thank you.
Anyone else have a question for Naomi?
Yeah, I'll jump in here if that's okay.
Yes, Colby?
Yeah, so
Colby from Canada?
I'm from Canada, not as, so a little north from everyone else, but not as north as when Naomi's up in Alaska. I just wanted to say thank you for your coming today. You know, I connected to a lot of your story. My family's in the retirement business, and I worked a lot with Alzheimer's and dementia, older adults. So I just watched, kind of tune into your documentary, your little short film you created, and I thought it was really great. Also, I took a note of your hope. What do you call it? The hope list, right?
Joy list.
Joy list, right. So I mean, I just wrote a little note and get my grandma to make one now, so it really just makes sense, because when you work with these people, it's really true that you want to try to find ways to make them enjoy the rest of the years they have, and sometimes it's hard to get them to communicate. So I guess with my question though is, what do you do daily? What do you do through your reinvention to make sure that if unfortunately you pass away tomorrow, you'd be happy with being here today? You'd be happy with your impact that you've left on this world. Like, what do you do daily, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I feel that now, daily, I try to stay in touch with people. I'm pretty isolated. I'm in Connecticut for the winter. I share a house with an 82-year-old psychotherapist who is much sharper than I am. And I have a corgi. I do a lot of hiking in the woods. Again, nature is really important to me, but basically because of the pandemic, I'm, pretty isolated. But in terms of if I say bye tomorrow, again, the work that I did with those cerebral palsy kids, and also my decision to go back to Katmai this year was very difficult, because I'm 68, I have asthma, a high-risk group for the virus, and a 4,000-mile trip did not sound like a very good idea in a pandemic. But then I realized that, oh dear, I'm just gonna do this. Okay. So I lost my train of thought because of the phone. So in deciding whether to go back to Katmai this year, I thought, these bear cams and my communications and our communications with people there is going to be really, really important this year in a pandemic. And because the bear cams helped me heal so much, it was my decision to pay it forward. And I did get COVID out there. I was asymptomatic, but I did it, but it was, I'm so glad that I did that, because the love that I got in return from the bear cam viewers, and sharing my experiences, because I'm one of them. It was the right decision for me to take that risk to go out there and pay it forward. And so I feel pretty good.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question? Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Hi, Naomi. I was just amazed the things that you've done. In terms of human motivation, sometimes they say when our competency goes up, our enthusiasm goes down. And when our enthusiasm is up, sometimes we trade enthusiasm for competency. Now, you did that quite a bit by moving from one place to another, but you did some calculated things. My question to you is, how did you know? You took such big risk, but what made you actually make that move, knowing that this is such a big move, this is such a big risk, and I'm gonna do it anyway. But it's not like you did it with no risk. So for many of us who have to balance risk with opportunity and change, what would you say to that?
I love your space, by the way.
Thank you. It's
it's a really interesting question. I guess because the opportunity to be at Brooks for the entire summer, for the entire season, when I had so fallen in love with the place, I'm so far away, it really, that reward, that opportunity was so much greater to me than the risk. And the same this year, when deciding this year to go, risking that 4,000-mile trip out there in the middle of a pandemic. And I think there's always some risk. I think also because I am a creative, as they say in the advertising business. You're always taking risks. You always got to push things, and if you're not taking risks, then it's not you're not being really creative. And innovation and some kind of risk taking is what you have to do, which means you fail sometimes. I mean, the bear cam viewers that are here today will tell you that I've had some failures on the cameras. So, but you keep going and know that you will have some failures, and that's okay.
Another question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? I can't see all of the screens.
Yeah, I'm scrolling to the other as well.
I can jump in here again if that's okay, if no one else has a question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so you did a lot of working in media and working in the public eye, and you're always trying to better your image, the image that you're putting out, the professional image. Through your life, through your journey, did you ever find that when your like the level of your professional image you put out reflected your personal image? Like, you at like, did you of yourself, like how did that compare? Like, did the quality of the work that you put out really make an impact on you, and how did you mitigate making sure you felt confident about the work that you're putting out, even though sometimes it may not be as well perceived as you would have hoped, I guess?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I basically think of myself as a storyteller, and that one has to you're constantly honing your craft. And I'm not sure. Sometimes things fall flat and you have to accept that. And when something really works, it's worth the times that you fell flat and it didn't work. And it's funny because the TV that I do from Katmai is all live. And I'm very comfortable doing it. And I think that relates back to my comfort level with the audience and my comfort level with the bears. I'm not afraid to ask questions of my mentor, Mike Fitz, with whom I do many of the broadcasts. I'm not afraid to say I don't know. That's a big one, saying I don't know. Frequently someone will ask me, what bear is that? And it's like, I don't know, it's a good looking bear. It's tough. I'm not sure I think about my personal image. I just try to be myself.
Right. So I guess with that, like, you wouldn't consider yourself as a perfectionist. I think you kind of alluded to that. Would you consider yourself a perfectionist?
In some ways, but not in all ways. I will push to get things better. But at times you just got to let it go when you know it can't be perfect, right? When I'm out at Katmai doing a live broadcast, I have no expectations of perfection. I just am trying to do the best I can, understanding the audience and what they want to know and what I might add. But when I'm making a film, it's a little different. You're trying to be as perfect as possible, but it's not about perfection. I don't think that can happen.
Joyce, did you find anyone that had a question?
Yeah, no, I'm scrolling and looking, and but a lot of folks are on phone, so I only see the receiver. So unless they've got to speak, so if you're on the phone and you have a question, you have to speak up because we can't see you.
I'm getting some really lovely comments in the chat, and thank you guys all. Some appreciation of the work that we do at Brooks, and it's pretty wonderful. I mean, it's great because it's a lot of work and it's hard, and but it's so rewarding. And part of the reward, is the audience. I'm so attached to the cams and the cam audience and the bears. I do love the bears.
So I want to ask you a question about purpose, since our business is all about purpose. How would you define, in the various stages of life that you have lived, how would you define your purpose? And do you feel your purpose has changed and evolved as you have gone through the stages of life?
Well, I think that I have a purpose as a storyteller, and to use that in different ways. And I did for a number of years, when I was doing things for PBS, I was doing a lot of things about Alzheimer's disease and about aging, and actually also did a film about service dogs. I did films on tough topics, but with hope. So, and then with the bears and the bear cams, it is about storytelling. It's all about storytelling to a higher purpose, I think. And how can I use my skills and my experience as a storyteller to enrich people's lives, to help them have better lives. When I'm at the falls and there are a bunch of people with cameras with long lenses and they're just looking through their cameras and there's really interesting behaviors happening, I'll say something provocative to them to get them to stop looking behind their cameras. And then they'll be asking me questions nonstop after that. And what that is using my storytelling capabilities to enrich someone else's life. And it's a two-way street. It's enriched my life enormously. So I think that really is my purpose, is using storytelling to enrich people's lives.
Okay.
Great. No, there are a number of people in the Bear family that want to watch this. Not 747, but the Bear Cam family.
How old is 747?
747 is around 20 something. Our oldest bear is Otis, who is about 25 or 26. He's our most famous bear, and he has won the Fat Bear contest a few times.
Now, do people get money or prizes for winning the fat bear? What do they get? A bear? A teddy bear?
Oh no, the people don't win. I mean, now there could have been some pools in Vegas, but and I do know on the cams that they collect brackets. Now I used to collect the brackets when before I went out to Katmai. So I don't know what's going on with that. I shouldn't know if there are any bets going on. But the fattest bear gets to be famous around the world.
Margaret Lewis, you held something up. What is that? It's a mask, and
oh, it's the Katmai Conservancy mask, and it has 747's nose on it.
Okay.
It is 747. Great.
It's 747.
So how do you know if it's the fattest bear, actually?
Well, we don't. I mean, it's a contest of love and fun. But this year, the fattest bear actually did win. He is our largest bear, and some rangers who have been there for many years say he is the fattest bear they've ever seen. He's the biggest bear they've ever seen there. Kodiak bears are known for being really the largest bears. Katmai bears are not much smaller, and 747 is the size of a Kodiak bear. He's huge.
And so, Gary, we're curious. Unmute yourself, and we want to know where you got that mug.
Excuse me. Here.
Oh, yes. From the Katmai.
An advertisement. There we go.
There you go, Katmai. And for those of us brand new to this, how does one, if one says, I'm interested in following a bear cam or becoming part of it, what do we do?
You go to explore.org and you go to the bear cams, and right now there are highlights streaming. And we have 8 cams at Brooks. There's only one live cam now, and that's on the Naknek River and King Salmon. But there are lots of highlights. And then explore.org has a YouTube channel, and a lot of the things are recorded there. So you can see a lot of different recordings of videos, and you can see the recordings of our educational live chats. And if it's not bear season and you've seen all the highlights, you can go to the Eagle Cam, or Bella the hummingbird laid some eggs and she's going to have some chicks soon. So it's just lots to do and keep you happy in lockdown.
Perfect.
So when the bears stop, they come out of hibernation.
Mm-hmm.
Do they actually at Brooks, do you know where the bears hibernate?
We don't. We have an idea of the kinds of places they like to hibernate. They probably are within 20 or so miles, but they has to be at a certain elevation so the snow will cover it. They have new dens each year, and we do know that some of the bears tend to go to the same areas to hibernate. And Mike Fitz, who is at Explore now as the resident naturalist. He actually found an old bear den and went inside it. So there's a video of that
Oh my gosh.
on Explore as well.
And do they make a nest? I mean, do they bring, I mean, it could be cold sleeping on rocks. Or they,
Well, it's they dig into the side of a mountain.
okay.
And they want to be usually between 1,000 and 2,000 feet elevation, and they dig in, and then the snow covers the den. And bears, the sows also they give birth in the den. If they're not fat enough, they won't get pregnant. The zygotes won't implant unless they're fat enough. And if they're fat enough, they will they'll have babies in late January, early February. Around now, there's some bears being born, and they're the size of a stick of butter when they're born.
Wow.
I mean, if only we could have such easy births, right? Give birth to a stick of butter when you're asleep. That would be nice.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, it is 5:13. We try to start pretty much on time and we end on time. I want to thank Naomi profusely for being our featured guest today with such an interesting topic, as well as such an interesting, well-lived life. I applaud you for being at a Harlem apartment. And I mean, being able to just get on a plane, I mean, just the difference that you left could not be more dramatic than to get on a float plane and there you are surrounded by mountains and bears. I mean, that's a stark difference.
It is. And that's life. That, if you want to enjoy life, contrast is everything.
Amen.
What a great way to end.
Brava.
If you want to enjoy life, contrast everything. Thank you very much. Very, very much appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.